Salvation, radio is
I want to tell you about Texas radio and the Big B.
It was a warm summer night with our song playing on the radio.
Hi, I'm Dick Lyons, and welcome back to I Remember Radio. He's been a disc jockey, a game show host, a manager, a producer, a promoter. He's brought the Beatles to Los Angeles 3 years in a row, and he has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's 9-time Emmy winner. He's an author and sought-after public speaker. He's Bob Eubanks, and he's one of a kind. Hi, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you guys?
Doing great, and I'm so excited and privileged to be here with you today. You are my star that I always followed from the time I was in high school to right now. In fact, you look younger than me, but that's okay.
Well, I tell everybody I'm 70 years old plus shipping and handling.
That's a good one. I like that. I actually worked with you one summer at the Cinnamon Cinder doing some publicity. We had an elephant twist contest.
Yes, I remember. Barry Friedman. Remember Barry?
Yeah, Barry came in with the idea, and I was working with you, and that was a big, successful promotion. Walter Winchell interviewed me on the air, called me on the phone, and the cover of the Daily News.
I got a Walter Winchell story when you want to hear it.
I'd like to hear it right now.
Okay. In 1964, I tried to get the Beatles. We sold it out in April in about 3 hours. And Winchell writes it in his column that he has under good authority that there will be a second show. And so I called him up. He was at the Ambassador Hotel. I said, Mr. Winchell, I said, first of all, I just want to tell you how important you were to my family and I during World War II. I mean, we listened to you every night. You were wonderful. Thank you. He says, yeah. I said, well, you put in your column today that there would be a second show. I said, well, I'm here to tell you that there won't be. He says, go to hell. And he slammed the phone down.
Oh, my God. That's an incredible story.
Oh.
He was actually nice to me, so I don't know why, but he was really interested. He was calling me to find out about if there really was going to be elephants there, and there was going to be an elephant twist contest. And I remember the elephants had wreaths of peanuts around their necks, and there were 3 of them that I think Barry arranged with the circus to appear, and we gave the money to charity that night.
And when the word got out, we got every TV and every radio station in the country, I think.
And that was part of your brilliance, too. I said, can I make it a KRLA thing? No, don't say KRLA. Let it go so everybody will cover it. Otherwise, the other radio stations won't cover it.
That's right.
So that was so smart. But you had a fabulous career with the Newlywed Game, 5 decades of hosting that, which is a record, I believe. What I really want to find out about, though, is radio, because this is all about I Remember Radio. How did you get started in radio?
Well, first of all, I went to radio school there in Hollywood, Don Martin School. And my first job was at a 250-watt radio station up in Oxnard, California. 200 watts went into the ocean and 50 watts went to the cemetery next door. I mean, I had this is a true story. I had a rock and roll album giveaway contest because I thought the big guys always did that. I must have mentioned it 200 times. And I finally said, okay, I'm going to give them away. I'll give them to the first person that calls. And nobody called.
Ooh.
And so I made up a name and took the albums home. But one morning I got off the air. I was working midnight till 8. I got off the air and I drove to the hot news station in Los Angeles, KRLA. And I wanted to see what the big guys look like. So I'm sitting there in the lobby and they're having a disc jockey meeting. And I noticed that the all-night man is not going to be there that night. And nobody wanted to sit in for him because they all did 3 hours and he does 6 hours. I walked up to the program director, Herb Hyman, who probably had 100 tapes on his desk of people wanting to work there. And I said, "Oh, hi there. I'm a disc jockey." He says, "You are?" He said, "Do you belong to the union?" I said, "No, but I can." I borrowed $360, joined the union, went on the air that night, and I was there 7 years to the day.
And what was the most exciting time other than the Beatles when you were getting going as a new jock? What was the big deal the big aha?
It was all exciting for me. I wasn't a particularly good disc jockey, but I was surrounded by good disc jockeys. I was there with Casey Kasem from Detroit, Dick Biondi from Chicago, and Wink Martindale from Memphis, and then me, the little Bob from Oxnard. And so I figured I better do something to make myself a little more important. And there was a nightclub that opened at the time in New York called the Peppermint Lounge. And they had a band called Joey D and the Starlighters, who, by the way, Joe Pesci was the guitar player.
Really?
And, yeah, they had a hit record. And so Peppermint Twist. So we opened a young adult nightclub called Cinnamon Cinder. And that's where the elephant contest was. And that kind of gave me a bit of importance at the radio station. But here again, I wasn't a particularly good disc jockey. I was surrounded by wonderful people.
I think you were a great disc jockey, and I love listening to your shows. And
Well,
coincidentally, I got to work with a lot of guys that you worked with at KRLA. Bob, Beautiful Bob, Emperor Hudson, and Dave Hall. And
yeah, the Hullabaloo was wonderful. He passed away a few months ago.
I know. I'm sorry to hear that.
But he was they made him the fifth Beatle, and he struck up a friendship with George's mother. She gave Dave all of the Beatles' home phone numbers, and he gave them out on the air.
That's really...
Yeah, he was wonderful. And then Emperor Hudson, he went to a Lakers game one night. And the Lakers lost, and the next morning he went on the air at 6 a.m. and said the game was fixed. I know it was fixed. And when he got off the air at 9 o'clock, there was an NBA attorney and a Lakers attorney in the lobby.
Oh my God!
And for the next 2 weeks, he had to apologize every time he opened his mouth. He had to apologize for saying it was fixed. So
he later wrote for the Smothers Brothers TV show.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Yeah,
and I heard Cecil Tuck did too.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that. Well, that was a great team at KRLA, and you were the #1 station in Los Angeles.
Yes, we were.
And
well, you know what I did? When we did the Beatle concert in '64, I had 3 partners. And when we did the final round, the total that we made was $4,000. I had to split that with my other 3 partners. And I swore I'd never do it again. But the Beatles made KRLA #1. And so when I was offered the Beatles the second year, I said, okay, I'll take them, but 2 nights. They said, okay. And I went to KRLA and I said, hey, how would you like to make it KRLA and Bob Eubanks Presents? And they said, okay. And I said, get out your checkbook. And so I got them for $100,000 for the next 2 years for that.
Good job. And then you started Concert Associates, or what?
Concert Associates. And Concert Associates was really busy. But what happened was when the whole San Francisco music came out, the whole drug culture, if you will, I didn't want to mess with it. So I got out. And I sold a company to Filmways. And then in 1972, I came back into the concert business, but this time with country music. And I had Merle Haggard for 10 years. And he and I never had a crossword. I managed Dolly Parton, Barbara Mandrell, and Marty Robbins. And so I was in the country music business to 76, I guess.
Superstars, all 4 of them are just amazing. I'm a big fan, especially of Dolly Parton.
Yeah, she's a nice lady, boy.
Really talented too. I'm interested in your transition to TV. The Newlywed Game, was that your first television show?
Well, no, I did some dance party shows. local dance party shows. Wink Martindale had one, then he quit because he wanted to go on and do other things. And so I did these dance party shows. But then these two guys named Nicholson and Muir went out to lunch one day, and they started talking about a format: husbands predict wives, wives predict husbands. They put it on a napkin, and they gave that napkin to Chuck Barris, who had the dating game on the air at the time. And he took it to CBS. And so they were looking for a host. And back then, they would audition disc jockeys. Later on, they auditioned weathermen, like Sajak and Letterman were both weathermen. And now I guess it's actors. I don't know. But I was lucky enough to win that audition. And I'll tell you a funny story. We had to show the format to the ABC executives in New York. So they all flew out to California, and we're in a studio with no cameras, but lights on the stage. And couple number one was an unknown comedian named Dom DeLuise and his wife, Carol. But that's not what sold the show. This is a true story. There was a cute little blonde down at the end. And I said, "What's your favorite nickname for your husband?" And she said, "Numbnuts." And the ABC boys flipped over backwards, went upstairs, and they bought the show without a pilot based on that answer.
That's a great story. And did you come up with Making Whoopi? Was that your line?
They wanted me to say "make love," and I wouldn't do it because I didn't think you should have to explain that to your children until you were ready to do so. So Sinatra had a hit record called Making Whoopi, and I said, "Let's call her Whoopi." They all agreed. And so that's how Whoopi became a four-letter word.
I think it's in the dictionary because of you.
Probably so. I don't know.
So that was a brilliant, brilliant move. And 5 decades of that show. You have the record. Even Bob Barker didn't have 5 decades of Truth or Consequences.
Yeah. Barker was funny, though. I was sharing a dressing room with Barker when I was doing Card Sharks. And up on the wall was a really ornate plaque that said WGMC. And being the rascal I am, I took it off the wall and I put it under the couch. Well, I'm out at the ranch, and we're roping cattle at the time because I was in the rodeo world too. We're out there roping cattle, and I get an emergency phone call from Jonathan Goodson, the producer. "Where's Barker's sign?" I said, "What sign?" He said, "Don't mess with me, Bob. Where's the sign?" I said, "Oh, for God's sakes." I said, why do you need it so bad? He said, "He won't record any shows until we find the sign." I said, "Oh, God, it's under the couch." I said, "What does WGMC mean?" He says, "World's Greatest MC."
That's a terrific story.
And he wouldn't go on the camera until he found it.
Just to digress for a minute, I know you went to Pierce College. Did you take any radio courses, or how did you prepare yourself to go for that first job?
Well, what happened is I went to Pierce College, and because I wanted to get a degree. So I went there for 2 years, and then I enrolled in Cal State Northridge, and I took a radio course. Now, I'm in radio at the time. And so the professor would say a bunch of stuff that wasn't true, and I would say, "Excuse me, sir, well, I don't think that's true." And I would tell him why it wasn't. I got a C in the class. So I decided I better get out of college. I was making too much money.
Did you go to Don Martin in Hollywood?
Yeah.
Was that the school you went to?
I went to Don Martin School of Radio and Television. And at that time, I worked at the Egyptian Theater up the street. And I was there with the guys that just come out of the Korean War, the big, deep voice guys like this, And there was me like that. So, but, I ended up getting a job up there in Oxnard, and things turned around for me. So,
well, Oxnard, KACY, I believe, were the call letters. Was it
1520?
1520. It turned out to be a 10,000 watt station later. I worked there too.
Yeah, not while I was there.
No, you had the 250 with nobody listening. What gave you the idea to want to be on the radio? I know you were a child model. So you were in show business. You had an eye for the camera.
I always wanted to be a disc jockey. And even when I was in junior high and high school, I took all kinds of speech courses and everything. I wanted to be a disc jockey. I don't know where I got it, but when I enrolled in junior college after I graduated from high school, it just didn't work. So I went to Don Martin's, and I'm so glad that I did. And
terrific school.
and then I worked at the Egyptian Theater around the street, of where I got fired, by the way.
For what?
Well, you see, I'm afraid of heights. So I was up on the ladder cleaning the marquee, and the ladder had wheels on it. And I would pull myself down Hollywood Boulevard. And a couple of guys come walking down the street, and they just get to me and they hit the ladder. And I'm rolling down Hollywood Boulevard. And so so anyway, I'm back cleaning again, and I had just got through cleaning the leaves off around there, and here come the two guys again, and just got right to the ladder, and they hit the ladder, but I had my feet on the outside rung, so I slid down. I got a broom, but I hit this guy right in the back of the head, and Mr. Michael John, the manager, walked out of the box office as I creamed this guy, and he said, "You're fired." So, but when I got my star in the Walk of Fame, I had it in front of the Egyptian Theater.
So when you were younger and you were thinking about radio, who were your influencers? Who did you listen to on the radio?
Well, there was a station, KLAC. They had the top 5 disc jockeys, Peter Potter and people like that. And I always listened to them, and I just liked the idea, because I wasn't thinking about television at the time. But the top 5, the Peter Potter and the top 5 there at KLAC, I think, and I can't remember the names of some of the other guys, but they had a huge influence on me.
Wasn't the Cinnamon Cinder the old Larry Potter's supper club?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be a strip
joint?
Yeah, we found all kinds of stuff downstairs. Yeah. It was a strip club. But there was no place for the young adults to go at the time to see live music without booze. And we did really, really well with it. We had one in North Hollywood and one in Long Beach. Those were the 2 big ones.
Traffic Circle.
What made it so important, in Alhambra, yep. And what made it so important is that I became a talent buyer. And I was buying talent from this agency, GAC. So when the Beatles did the Ed Sullivan Show on February 9, 1964. After that, 70 million people, by the way, watched that night. Then they announced they were going to tour America, and they signed with GAC. So I called GAC, and because I was a talent buyer. Well, first of all, GAC went to their regular promoters, and the guy turned them down. He'd never heard of them. And so that was a good thing. And so I went to GAC and I said, I want them. They said, well, you've never produced a concert before. I said, I know it, but I still want them. And they said, okay, you can have the Beatles if you have the bowl. And I went to the bowl and said, yeah, you can have the bowl if you have the Beatles. I finally got them all together. And that's the way it worked out.
Well, you're a great businessman. I think all the wonderful things you've done in your life, including the Rose Parade. I don't want to skip that because I was a big fan every New Year's Day. I think it was you and Stephanie Edwards and later Lisa Gibbons. 38
years. And I think that what really helped us, first of all, Steph knew a lot about bands because she was in a band at one time.
Oh.
But my rodeo world, I participated in the rodeo world for a long time. And then I became the announcer on the National Finals Rodeo on television. But I learned about horses, and I was able to talk about horses. And Steph talked about the bands, and we both talked about the floats and such. And so it was a good team.
You were terrific. I mean, it was such a great description. I think you followed, I remember Channel 11 used to have the exclusive Bill Welch. And then you took over for all those years and just did a wonderful job describing everything. That was a hard gig too.
The reason that we decided to leave is kind of what Ben Scully said. I didn't want anybody walking into the booth and saying, hey, you're too old to do this. So left while we were on top. Our ratings were twice that of all the other channels combined. Now, had I known they were going to hire Lisa Gibbons, I might have stuck around for another year. Well, it's been canceled.
I know. I think it would have still been on with you. You were just
Yeah.
so descriptive, and I love horses and all animals too. And I just,
Well, Lisa and I did a Christmas parade together.
right, the Hollywood.
I did with Lee Merriweather also. That was a fun time too.
Well, you're really good at it. You have a lot of skills. And I'm really curious about your roller skating career because when I met you way back 55 years ago or so, I know that you were a roller skating champion and the Olympics canceled the event or you would have gone. You were a California State roller skating champion, weren't you?
Yeah, originally I went to roller derby school.
Right. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I went to roller derby school. I went downtown Los Angeles, and I discovered that roller derby wasn't on the up and up like I thought it was because I was a big roller fan, Red Martin, all those people. So but I loved to skate, and I ended up being a figure skater, and I ended up competing then as a figure skater. I think I won the California championships a couple of years, and the best I ever did in the nationals was fourth place. But then I ended up teaching skating for a while too. It was fun.
Did you work at the Rainbow Rink in Van Nuys?
No, I worked at the Moonlight Rollaway in Pasadena.
Okay, you remember the Rainbow
And
Rink though,
then-
don't you?
Yeah, then one in the Northridge skating rink.
Right. So you have to have a lot of balance to roller skate. I mean, I've fallen more times than I've stood up. And to also ride a bucking bronco or
I didn't
those
ride
kind
any
of,
bucking horses. I only
you did?
roped. Yeah, I only roped. But
Okay,
you know, the thing is, because of the rodeo and the skating and all that, I had both hips replaced.
oh,
That had really severe back surgery, and I was falling down. I was walking bent over and everything. And a friend of mine named Dan Metcalf, who has 36 professional soccer players playing right now that he trained. He came to me and he said, "Come over to my house and I want to see if I can straighten you out." And in the next month or so, he invented this balance board. I don't know if you've seen the commercials or not, but the 60 up balance board. And I can look anybody in the eye and tell you that it changed my life in about 3 weeks' time. I'm walking straight up. I'm not falling down. I'm back playing golf for crying out loud.
I've seen the commercials on CNN and I think it's fantastic. You're really
It's
doing good work for people that really need
Yeah.
help.
If anybody has balance issues or somebody in their family, just go to the number 60up.com and check it out. We've helped so many people and I'm so proud of it.
So anything planned in the future or are you happily retired?
Well, yeah, I do a live game show that we travel around the country with called Hollywood's Greatest Game Shows. We play a lot of casinos with that, and that's fun. But then I put together a Beatles show, Backstage with the Beatles. And I tell seldom heard or never before heard stories about the Beatles that lead up to music. And I have a Beatle band on stage with me, and we show a lot of video at the same time too. And it's been very successful. We've sell out almost everywhere we go.
Can you give us a little taste, a couple stories about the Beatles?
It's really amazing. In 64, the Beatles, and I'm not avoiding your question, but in 64, the Beatles were wide-eyed and they wanted to meet Jane Mansfield, and they were just very innocent like. And in 65, they were tired and they wanted to meet Elvis Presley. So Brian Epstein, the Beatle manager, and Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, got together, which was like Larry the Cable Guy meeting Albert Einstein. And they decided that the Beatles would go over to Elvis's house. And so they went over to Elvis's house. And now here's a band that ruined his career, basically. And they're sitting there and they're waiting for Elvis to come down. And they sit there, and McCartney had something in his hand that he had never seen before in his life. It was a thing you could hold in your hand, and you could point it at the television, and it would change the channel.
Wow.
And he was amazed at that. And that was the big thing about him that night. You know, Ringo was gambling with Colonel Parker, but they just sat there and stared at Elvis. And Elvis finally said, if you guys aren't going to talk to me, I'm going to get up and go to bed. So that kind of loosened it up a little bit. So they met Elvis in 65. And then in 1966, they were a band that no longer wanted to be together. I produced Dodger Stadium 66. That was the second to the last concert they ever did for money. They went on to Candlestick Park in San Francisco, and it held 50,000. They only sold 22,000 seats. So Beatlemania was really coming to a halt at that time. But it was wonderful. I mean, they were wonderful. John Lennon and I didn't get along very well, but Paul McCartney, wonderful, just wonderful. You know, the rest of the guys are great.
Well, Bob, what a privilege to talk to you today on I Remember Radio.
Well, thank you.
You're such an important person in my life and in the business. I don't think there's anybody that's more successful than you've been in media, and you've been on movies, of course, your television career, the Rose Parade, your radio career, all your promotions.
I've got another book I'm writing.
Oh, tell me about it, please.
Short stories about big people. I'll give you an example. I was at Buddy Hackett's house because I was producing his game show, and Cary Grant sitting next to you at dinner. I said, why? He says, Barbara and I watch the Newlywed Game every night. I said, Cary Grant watches the Newlywed Game? He said, oh, we're a real couple. I said, what do you mean you're a real couple? He says, we only have one toothbrush.
What? That's the wildest. I don't think you could top that one. But if you have another one, I'll take it. But that is
well,
really
I'll
amazing.
leave you with this. A lady walked up to me the other day and she said, how would you like to have super sex? I said, I'll take the soup.
You are terrific and always have been.
Thank
I remember your blue Porsche riding around and going to Pickwick Bowl. There was a remote TV broadcast. We went, and just such an influence on me in my career. Thank you, Bob Eubanks.
Well, thank you.
You are a superstar and a super nice guy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless.
I Remember Radio, and we will never forget Bob Eubanks.
Just don't spell it backwards.
Oh, now I'm thinking.
My mother used to put 2 O's in it. You know? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
It was a warm summer